Hey everyone, welcome back to Reading with Tatiana. Today I'm reviewing The Color Purple by Alice Walker, and I gave this book a 4 out of 5. My Booktuber shout today goes out to the official hijab reader, who I'll link her channel down below. She is a new Booktuber, so if you want to give her some support, check out her channel. And as always, before I go into my full book review, I always appreciate it if you like my content to please hit the subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and if you have read this book, I would love to hear what you thought of this book down below. This is an older book. It was published in 1982, and the genre I would put it in is fiction and also, I guess, specific about African American life back in the day and slice of life. A bit about the author Alice Walker. She's born in 1944 in the state of Georgia in the US, where this book is also set. She is an American novelist and she's a short story writer, a poet, and social activist. And in 1982, she became the first African American woman to win the Pulitzer Prize for fiction for The Color Purple. This book has also been adapted into a movie, which I haven't seen yet, but I'm planning to watch, and we'll also do a review of that as well. One tidbit about Alice Walker that I thought was kind of fun was, well, not fun when I shared the tidbit, is she was shot by one of her brothers. She was the youngest of 8 brothers and sisters. When she was the age of 8, her brother shot her in the eye with a BB gun. And because they lived in a more rural part of the country and didn't have access to a car, she wasn't able to get immediate medical access. And because of that, she became permanently blind in one eye. But because of that, she also then had time to stay at home and recover and turn into reading and writing, which is pretty like a good twist of events, I guess, because she became a very prolific American author. Another thing that I thought was interesting about her is where she grew up and also the time where she grew up. There was still segregation, unfortunately. So she went to the only high school in her area that was available to Black people. But luckily she excelled and she became valedictorian, and ultimately she was able to continue in college and pursue her career in writing. A bit about the story and the characters. So this book is pretty heavy, and I don't know if it's officially a slice of life, but I kind of see it as a slice of life because there's a huge cast of characters and it spans like several decades, and it's just a very interesting premise because right away it starts like pretty heavy and pretty dark. Basically, we meet Sally and she writes to God, like not all the time, but like pretty frequently, and she kind of writes in first person about her experiences, and then the other part of the story is told through Nettie, who is Sally's sister, and Nettie's writing to Sally, and so the story progresses by them writing letters back and forth to each other, but for the first bit it's just Sally writing to God, and eventually she writes to her sister Nettie. And from these letters we come to learn about Sally's upbringing. She was, I think, a child of many children, and she was unfortunately raped by her own father, which then produced 2 kids, and then she lost these 2 kids from her possession pretty quickly. She doesn't know what happens to them, and then she's married off to Mr. Blank. And it's important that this guy is called Mr. Blank because it shows that later on, I'm not spoiling it really because I feel this book progresses really quickly in the beginning. Mr. Blank is her husband that she's very off to, and he's very abusive and doesn't treat her well, and he's called Mr. Blank in the book, like there's an underline instead of his name, because it kind of shows this like power dynamic that she's not able to address him by his first name and that kind of stuff. So basically her husband, Mr. Blank, abuses her, and he also has this mistress that's like a singer or a jazz singer, and he takes her home, and in a turn of events, her name is Shug. Shug and Sally become close and actually in some ways even become lovers. And because of Shug in her life, which is her husband's mistress, there is a turn of events where Shug believes in her, fights for Sally, and you see this transformation over time because of the connection with the other human being that supports her, this like sisterhood of being women together. And then over the course of several years, and like I almost even like leading to a decade, we see this change in Sally. That's kind of like the I guess like the high level overview of the story, but there's so much more, and I don't want to like ruin it, but I feel like it's really worth reading. Like it's a great story about this certain part of the US during this time period, and how like relationships between family, romance, and friends can be very complicated, and it's not always black and white, but everyone just pulls through, and it's really enjoyable to kind of get lost and immerse in this world for a bit while you read this book. Common theme that I found out sprinkled through this book is I kind of touched on it earlier, how like relationships and how they can look like and how they can be different from what you read or grow up watching in the movies. It doesn't always have to be man meets woman and they have kids. Like, it can be more complicated than that. So I really like how this book explores different types of relationships, romantically or not, throughout your lives. And I feel this book is actually very forward for its time in 1980s, and I really enjoyed that. I also really like this book, the theme about it, because it kind of talks about or explores the idea of how people end up in their circumstances, and it gives you a lot of empathy of why people become the way they are and why maybe they struggle or don't have confidence, and I really enjoyed that part about the book. And the other thing I enjoyed, which I don't know if it was the intention of the book, but Nettie Selly's sister actually becomes a missionary in Africa, and I really like the topic of talking about the scramble of Africa from the African point of view, because I've only learned about the scramble of Africa from like university or from a Western point of view, but I've never like really read about it from like the villagers' point of view. So I really enjoyed that in this book. One thing I really did enjoy about the book, which I think a lot of people also didn't enjoy, was that the author, Alice Walker, writes in Sally's voice and in her accent, which sometimes in writing can be difficult and kind of takes away from reading. And I did find that a bit difficult to get immersed sometimes because it's very chaotic for me. But some people may enjoy that because maybe it does immerse you more. But for me, it was a bit hard sometimes to read the book like smoothly. Things I did enjoy about the book, there were many things. I really enjoyed Shug, the mistress, and Cecile, the protagonist's relationship slash friendship, and how they were each other's like cheerleaders and also support network and comfort and companionship and just so much. It was just a great relationship to see that you don't see normally in TVs or movies. I also love how in this book that the men who were abusers were able to change throughout time. I do think that people can change, they don't always change, and it's really nice to see that these men who were quite abusive in the beginning were open to change. And I also enjoyed the glimpse into missionary life in Africa, as I've never really read anything about that before. So these are all things I really enjoy about this book. It really opened my perspectives, which I find is really important thing about reading that I love, that it can always change your mind. On Goodreads, this book, The Color Purple by Alice Walker, got an average of 4.25 out of 5. I think this is pretty accurate. I think it's a pretty like important book, even though it's from the 1980s, and I think it has an impact even like decades later, even almost like half a century later. So reasons why people didn't like it was they felt the characters weren't likable. I mean, I think that's very valid. They're not likable, but I don't think it takes away from this book being enjoyable. They didn't like the format of letters writing back and forth to tell the plot. They felt the characters, because of that, didn't really develop because they're just talking first person and it's just their observations of other characters, which I can see the struggle with not liking that type of format. Reasons why people liked this book was they thought it was an honest sharing of uncomfortable truths and glimpse of African American livelihood. I definitely agree with that. I had no exposure to this part of the US history ever. I know it's just one little slice of it, but it made me very curious to learn more. And people also love the themes of women's rights, women's relationships between each other, and the growth of all of the female characters. Why I think you should read this book. I think you should read it if, as I said before, a book that changes your perspective of mind is always really great for your soul. I think this book, you should read it if you want to learn more about this time period of American history, and especially about African American people during this time period. Now I'll share how this book made me feel, because if you ask me about what book was about a week, a year, 5 years from now, I probably won't remember exactly what happened in the book, but I'll always remember how it made me feel. So The Color Purple by Alice Walker, when I finished it, it made me feel empowered for the women in the book, and how, you know, if you're ever struggling in a tough situation, they're always able to get out of it, and there's always hope for change, because change is inevitable. And yeah, this book really had an impact on me, and I really want to wish for so much empowerment for not just women, but anyone out there struggling and going through a tough time. Thank you for watching until the end of my book review for The Color Purple by Alice Walker. If you want to join me next time, I am reading Plot Twist by Bethany Turner. This is the second Bethany Turner book I'm reading. The first one I actually didn't enjoy, but I'm giving her a second chance because I was just in the mood for some contemporary romance. Thanks for watching until the end of my book review, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!